Picture this scenario. You have done everything right. You built your emergency fund. You stopped living paycheck to paycheck. You have maybe $15,000 or $20,000 sitting in your savings account, and everyone around you thinks you have got it figured out. But here is the thing nobody tells you about this stage. The anxiety does not actually disappear. It just changes shape. Now, instead of worrying about whether you can afford groceries this week, you are lying awake at 2 in the morning wondering if you will ever be able to afford a house. Instead of stressing about car repairs, you are calculating how many decades it will take you to actually retire. You have escaped the survival zone, but you have landed in something almost worse. Financial purgatory. You are not broke, but you are definitely not free either. Sound familiar? Well, what if I told you there is a specific savings milestone that actually shifts everything? Not just your bank balance, but your entire relationship with work, with risk, with opportunity, and honestly with life itself. And here's the part that might surprise you. It is not $100,000. It is not $250,000. The number that creates the most dramatic transformation in how you experience daily existence is $50,000. Most financial content focuses on either the early milestones like your first 10,000 or the distant dream numbers like becoming a millionaire, but almost nobody talks about what happens in between. And that is a massive oversight because $50,000 is where the psychology of money fundamentally rewires itself in your brain. This is where you stop playing defense and start playing offense with your financial life. I spend an uncomfortable amount of time researching the psychology of wealth building and why certain numbers seem to create inflection points in people's financial journeys. If you have ever wondered what it actually feels like to cross different savings thresholds, and more importantly, what becomes possible at each level, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a thumbs up if this video helps clarify things for you. Now, before we dive into what makes $50,000 so transformative, let me paint you a picture of what life looks like when you are stuck in the $20,000 to $40,000 range. And I am willing to bet a lot of you watching this are somewhere in this zone right now. You have built up a decent savings cushion. Maybe it took you years of discipline and sacrifice to get there. You should feel proud, and honestly, you do feel proud sometimes. But there is this nagging sensation that you cannot quite shake. You have enough money to handle emergencies, but not enough to actually change your life. You scroll through real estate listings knowing you could maybe scrape together a down payment on the cheapest properties. But the monthly payments would stretch you so thin that one unexpected expense would wreck everything. You think about starting a business or investing more aggressively, but the idea of risking your hard-earned savings makes your stomach turn. You have worked too hard to build this cushion to watch it disappear. So you do what most people in this position do. You sit on it. You keep the money in a savings account earning almost nothing. You tell yourself you are being responsible, being patient, waiting for the right opportunity. But months turn into years and that $25,000 is still just sitting there, slowly losing value to inflation while you slowly lose momentum on your financial journey. This is what I call the accumulation plateau. And it is where most people get stuck indefinitely. You have proven you can save money, but you have not yet reached the threshold where your money can actually start working harder than you do. You are in this uncomfortable middle ground where you have too much to feel broke, but not enough to feel wealthy. And that psychological limbo is exhausting in ways that people who have not experienced it simply cannot understand. The worst part is watching people around you make financial moves that you cannot quite afford to make. Your coworker puts a down payment on a rental property. Your friend quits their job to start a business. Your cousin maxes out their retirement accounts, while you are still calculating whether you can afford to contribute more than the minimum. You know you are doing better than average, but average is not where you want to be. And that gap between where you are and where you want to be starts to feel like it is widening instead of closing. But here's where things get interesting. There is a specific psychological phenomenon that happens when you cross the $50,000 threshold. And it has almost nothing to do with what you can buy. In fact, most people who reach this milestone do not dramatically change their spending habits at all. The real transformation is much more fundamental than that. The first thing that changes is your relationship with time. When you have less than $50,000 saved, You are essentially trading hours for dollars with no end in sight. You might invest a little, save a little, but the math never quite works out to anything life changing. But when you cross 50,000, something shifts in how you perceive your financial future. Suddenly, the compound interest calculations start looking real instead of theoretical. If you invested $50,000 and never added another penny in 25 years at average market returns, you would have somewhere around $340,000. That is not retirement money for most people, but it is not nothing either. For the first time, you can actually see a mathematical path from where you are to where you want to be, and that visibility changes everything about how you make decisions. There is also something fascinating that happens to your risk tolerance when you hit 50,000. Behavioral economists have found that people with this level of savings are significantly more likely to make strategic career moves, negotiate harder for salary increases, and pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. Why? Because $50,000 represents roughly one full year of expenses for the average person. And having a year of runway changes how you think about everything. Think about the last time you wanted to ask for a raise or push back on unreasonable work demands. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, or even if you just have a few months of expenses saved, there is always this voice in the back of your head reminding you that you cannot afford to rock the boat. You need this job. You need this income. And this income. So you stay quiet. You accept less than you deserve, and you slowly build resentment toward a situation you feel powerless to change. But when you have $50,000 in the bank, that internal calculation shifts dramatically. You are not going to quit your job over every minor frustration, but you might finally have the confidence to have those difficult conversations you have been avoiding. You might be willing to apply for positions that feel like a stretch. You might even start quietly building something on the side because you know that even if it fails, you have the financial cushion to absorb the loss. Here is something that most people do not realize about the $50,000 milestone. This is the amount where serious opportunities start becoming accessible. Not theoretical opportunities that require six figures to participate in. Real, tangible opportunities that can change your financial trajectory. Let me give you some specific examples. Real estate investing, which is how most millionaires build their wealth, typically requires somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 to get started meaningfully. That covers a 20% down payment on a modest rental property, closing costs, and enough reserves to handle unexpected repairs or vacancies. Below this threshold, you are either priced out entirely or you are stretching yourself so thin that one bad month could ruin you. Starting a legitimate business, not a side hustle but an actual business with infrastructure and growth potential, usually requires somewhere in this range as well. You need enough capital to cover startup costs, initial inventory or equipment, marketing, and most importantly, enough runway to survive the months or years before the business becomes profitable. Even traditional investing changes at this level. With $50,000, you have enough to properly diversify across different asset classes, access investment opportunities with higher minimums, and weather market downturns without panicking and selling at the worst possible time. You stop being a small fish hoping not to get eaten and start becoming a participant who can actually benefit from how the financial system works. I know someone who spent 5 years stuck at around $30,000 in savings. Every time an investment opportunity came up, he was either just short of the minimum or too worried about depleting his safety net to participate. He watched friends and colleagues make moves that he could not quite afford to make. Then he crossed $50,000, and within 18 months he had purchased a small rental property that now generates $500 per month in passive income. The opportunity was not new. His ability to seize it was. But perhaps the most significant change that happens when you save $50,000 is how you start seeing yourself. And I do not mean this in some vague self-help way. I mean there is a measurable shift in identity that occurs at this milestone. When you have 10 or 20,000 saved, you think of yourself as someone who is good with money. You are responsible. You are disciplined, but you still fundamentally identify as someone who works for money. Your savings exist to protect you from life's unexpected disasters. When you cross 50,000, something different happens. You start thinking of yourself as someone who has money, not rich, not wealthy. but someone with actual financial substance. Your savings stop being just a safety net and start becoming a tool for building the life you actually want. This identity shift affects everything: how you dress, how you carry yourself in professional situations, how you negotiate, what you believe you deserve. Studies on financial psychology consistently show that people who perceive themselves as having financial security make better decisions across every domain of life. They are more patient, more strategic, more willing to delay gratification for better outcomes. There is also a fascinating social dynamic that changes at this level. When you are constantly worried about money, it affects how you interact with others in ways you might not even notice. You might avoid certain social situations because of the cost. You might feel inferior to friends who seem more financially stable. You might downplay your ambitions because they feel unrealistic given your current situation. But when you have 50,000 saved, you carry yourself differently. You are not flashing money or being obnoxious about it. You just have this quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have options. You can pick up the check without wincing. You can suggest activities without mentally calculating whether you can afford them. You can focus on the people you are with instead of the financial implications of every interaction. Let me talk about something called decision fatigue, which sounds like corporate buzzword nonsense, but is actually a real psychological phenomenon that affects every aspect of your life. Every day you make hundreds of micro decisions about money. Should I bring lunch or buy it? Can I afford this subscription? Is it worth paying for the faster shipping? Each of these tiny calculations burns mental energy. When you have $50,000 saved, a huge percentage of these daily decisions simply stop mattering. You are not choosing the cheaper option because you have to. You are choosing based on what you actually prefer and what makes sense for your life. This might seem like a small thing, but imagine how much mental energy you would free up if you eliminated 200 minor financial calculations from your daily life. That mental energy has to go somewhere. And typically it redirects toward higher level thinking about your career, your investments, your goals, your relationships. You stop spending cognitive resources on survival and start spending them on growth. This is why people who cross significant savings thresholds often experience sudden accelerations in other areas of life. It is not magic. It is just redirected mental bandwidth. Now let us talk about what $50,000 can actually do for you in practical terms. Because this is not just about feelings and psychology. There are concrete doors that open at this level that simply do not exist below it. First, homeownership becomes genuinely accessible in most markets. $50,000 covers a 20% down payment on a $250,000 home, which is still below the median home price in most areas, but puts you in a real house in many markets. More importantly, 20% down means no private mortgage insurance, better interest rates, and monthly payments that are actually manageable. Investment property becomes possible. A smaller rental property in a secondary market might require $30,000 to $40,000 down plus reserves. The remaining $10,000 to $20,000 gives you cushion for unexpected repairs, vacancies, or market fluctuations. This is how ordinary people start building passive income streams. Career risk becomes manageable. $50,000 represents roughly 12 months of bare bones living expenses for most people. That means you can take a calculated risk on a better opportunity, whether a job loss without panic, or even take time off to pursue additional education or skills that could dramatically increase your earning potential. Business investment becomes realistic. Whether it is starting your own venture or investing in someone else's, this is the threshold where you can participate meaningfully without betting everything you have. You can take a $10,000 position in a promising opportunity and still have $40,000 to fall back on if things do not work out. Here is something that might blow your mind. The person with $50,000 saved is not just 5 times better off than someone with $10,000. They are exponentially better positioned because of something I call the optionality multiplier. When you have $10,000 saved, your money can basically do one thing: sit there and protect you from emergencies. Maybe you can invest it, but the amounts are small enough that the returns barely move the needle in any meaningful time frame. When you have $50,000, your money can do multiple things simultaneously. You can maintain a full emergency fund while also investing aggressively. You can save for a down payment while also starting a side business. You can take investment risks while also preserving capital. The ability to pursue multiple financial strategies at once accelerates wealth building in ways that simple mathematics does not capture. This is why financial progress feels so slow at first, and then suddenly starts compounding. The person who took 10 years to save their first 50,000 might add another 50,000 in just 3 to 4 more years. Not because they are earning more or saving harder, but because their money is finally working alongside them instead of just sitting in a defensive position. Now you might be thinking that $50,000 sounds like an impossible amount to save, especially if you are currently somewhere in the 10 to 30,000 range and progress feels painfully slow. But here is what is interesting about human psychology and money accumulation. The hardest part is not saving the money itself. The hardest part is maintaining momentum when results feel invisible. The brutal truth is that saving your first 10,000 probably took significant sacrifice and willpower. Saving your second 10,000 was probably a little easier because you had already built the habits. And here is the thing most people do not realize. Saving your third, fourth, and fifth 10,000 gets progressively easier because you have already done the hardest part, which is becoming the type of person who builds wealth. If you are currently stuck somewhere below 50,000, I want you to consider something. You are probably closer than you think. Most people who reach this milestone do it through a combination of consistent saving and 1 or 2 strategic moves that accelerate their progress. Maybe it is negotiating a raise, picking up a side income stream, selling some things they no longer need, or simply finding expenses they can cut without feeling deprived. The average person who goes from 10,000 to 50,000 does not do it by saving $500 a month for 80 months. They do it by saving consistently while also finding ways to add chunks of money through bonuses, tax refunds, side projects, or windfalls. They treat unexpected money as acceleration fuel rather than lifestyle upgrade funding. Here is something I want you to understand about the $50,000 milestone. It is not the finish line. It is the starting line for a completely different phase of wealth building. Below this number, you are essentially preparing yourself for opportunities. Above this number, you are executing on opportunities. The person who saves their first 50,000 has proven something to themselves that no amount of financial education can teach. They have proven they can delay gratification, maintain discipline over extended periods, and resist the constant pressure to consume everything they earn. These skills are worth far more than the money itself, because they are the skills that separate people who build wealth from people who merely earn income. Think about it this way. Your first 50,000 was built almost entirely through earning and saving. Your next 50,000 will probably involve a significant component of your money actually making money. Investment returns, rental income, business profits, equity appreciation. The game changes because you now have pieces on the board that can move independently of your direct labor. So there you have it. $50,000 is not just a bigger version of 10,000. It represents a fundamental shift in your financial existence. It is the difference between hoping things work out and knowing you have options. It is the difference between reacting to life and actually directing it. It is the line between being someone who works for money and being someone who has money working for them. If you are currently staring at a savings balance that feels impossibly far from this number, I want you to remember something important. Every single person who has crossed this threshold started exactly where you are right now. They had the same doubts, the same setbacks, the same moments of wondering if financial progress would ever feel real. The only difference between them and someone who never reaches this milestone is that they kept going anyway. The transformation that happens when you save $50,000 is not really about the money itself. It is about becoming the type of person who can generate $50,000 through discipline, creativity, and persistence. And once you become that person, the next 50,000 is not a matter of if but when, because you have fundamentally changed the trajectory of your financial life in ways that compound far beyond anything that shows up in your bank balance. The person you become while building toward 50,000 is infinitely more valuable than the money itself. That person makes better decisions, sees more opportunities, and carries themselves with a quiet confidence that opens doors you cannot even see from where you are standing right now. And that transformation is worth every sacrifice, every delayed purchase, and every moment of discipline it takes to get there. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. And remember that on the other side of $50,000 is a version of your life that you can barely imagine from here. But I promise you, it is worth the journey.